Good afternoon and welcome to the Midday News. I'm Shamela Pullen. Here's what we have in the bulletin.
Political scientist urges government to address USS concerns. Calls for Ebola quarantine facilities in Jamaica. And later in sports, John Campbell, the only Jamaican in West Indies ODI squad for Sri Lanka series.
Thank you for joining us. Now the details. Government officials, including the police and JDF personnel, are waiting to tour the United States ship Nimitz, which now docked at the Kingston Harbour. It's part of the final stop of the United States Southern Seas 2026 deployment. Andrea Chisolm is on location where an arrival ceremony is expected to begin soon.
I'm here at the Kingston Freeport Terminal, where one of the largest aircraft carriers in the world, the USS Nimitz, docked here in the Kingston Harbour on Monday morning. It's actually a very, very big carrier. It's over 1,000 feet long. It was first commissioned in 1975, so it's actually 51 years old and is scheduled to be decommissioned in 2027. Now, since news broke that the USS Nimitz was coming to Jamaica, there have been many questions. People have been talking about the timing, and people are trying to figure out why is it that the vessel is here in Jamaica. Well, we must point out that Information Minister Senator Dana Morris Dixon indicated that it is actually a symbol of the long-standing relationship between Jamaica and the United States. On Saturday, when she toured the vessel, she actually described the bond between both countries as unshakable and unbreakable. So at this moment, we're still awaiting clearance to go on the vessel. Sailors and other individuals from the U.S. Navy are still trying to prepare the vessel so that individuals from the media, as well as police and JDF officials and other government officials, can also get a tour of the carrier. So we will have much more later in Primetime News at 7. It's back to you in studio.
Political scientist Damian Gordon is urging the government to address public concerns over the visit of the USS Nimitz, which begins today. While officials say the visit will focus on community outreach and cooperation, Mr. Gordon says public unease is understandable given current geopolitical tensions and U.S. policy toward Cuba.
The Trump-led administration has clearly identified Cuba as its next target, with an increasingly hostile rhetoric pointing to the strong potential for military intervention to effect regime change. So Cuba, as we all know, is currently the subject of crippling sanctions that are triggering a genuine humanitarian crisis that most Jamaicans are aware of and feel strongly about, given our strong fraternal relations with Cuba. There is heightened sensitivity in the region about how Caribbean states are perceived as responding to this reality. And from this perspective, this visit may be read by some as a signal of alignment or, in worst case scenario, complicity. And that is why it is absolutely necessary for the government to provide clarity on the purpose of this docking.
Mr. Gordon argues that these concerns should be acknowledged rather than dismissed.
We've seen similar naval visits and engagements in the region, including in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think by now most of us have a fairly good picture of where Trinidad stands. So against this backdrop, it is reasonable that questions arise as to why Jamaica at this point in time has been chosen and why this ship is coming to Jamaica.
The United States ship Nimitz has already visited Panama, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil and hosted government officials from Guyana and Suriname ahead of its arrival in Jamaica. To other news now, medical expert Dr. Winston Dawes is calling on the Ministry of Health and Wellness to establish dedicated quarantine facilities for travelers arriving from countries affected by Ebola. His recommendation follows reports that 8 passengers entering Jamaica had recently travel histories linked to affected regions.
While health officials have placed the travelers under mandatory self-quarantine and monitoring, medical expert Dr. Winston warns that self-isolation alone may not be sufficient. He argues that if any of the individuals are infected with Ebola, they could still pose a risk to others. Dr. Dawes is therefore calling for dedicated quarantine facilities to strengthen containment measures.
Incubation period can be between 2 to 21 days, and symptoms arising from a week upwards. Now, if they're asymptomatic, then they would tend to be not infectious. But once you start having symptoms, then it is extremely infective, and very few people recover from it. And there is no vaccine for the addition of the Ebola virus. So you can't trust people to self-isolate. Another thing is that if you self-isolate in a house, then you might potentially, if it is a case of Ebola, the entire household could be infected.
Dr. Dawes is also urging the health ministry to ensure that adequate hazmat suits and other protective equipment are available for healthcare workers. He further warns that increased global travel raises the risk of Ebola spreading beyond affected regions and reaching countries such as Jamaica.
In today's world, everything is interconnected. In the old days, if you want to get it and you go and buy a boat, it takes several days. So by the time the boat would reach harbor, everybody would have been contaminated and probably died. But you take an airplane at the beginning, during incubation period, you arrive here healthy. You go home and about your business, you start feeling like ill with flu or whatever it is, but it's not flu, it's Ebola.
Dr. Dawes says Jamaica must remain vigilant and strengthen its preparedness measures to prevent any potential Ebola outbreak on the island.
We have to be on the alert, the doctors, nurses, and the general population, so that if they notice somebody who has traveled and they may have lied that they were in the Congo, or if they spent some time in the States with somebody who had been there and developed it. So, an unfortunate thing, the last time that they had the Ebola outbreak, the Cubans volunteered and they gave a real-time report as to what was happening. They are no longer a part of that. And there has been a cutback in the funding of the WHO from the US. In addition to that, it's occurring in a war zone. And this edition of Ebola has spread far faster and further afield than any other outbreak.
Ebola is a rare but often deadly disease caused by a group of viruses. Early symptoms include fever, severe headache, fatigue, muscle and joint pain, sore throat, and weakness. In severe cases, the illness can progress to vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Aliyah Bryant, TVJ News.